Welcome to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. This is Victor. Now, our villain series are very popular, but the question I'm going to immediately answer right here is why the heck would you ever care about a villains episode on Adolf Eichmann? Okay, because you might be like, we watch your channel, but why would we care about this? This dude's incredibly important, right?
Okay.
Because we covered it in another episode. He was kidnapped by the Mossad, taken to trial in Israel.
Like recently. Not recently.
In the 60s, yeah, 1961. Okay, and so what happened is they have this 8-month-long trial with 111 witnesses who were Holocaust survivors come forward. And this is the situation that makes people be like, oh, the Holocaust. This is where they embedded it in the consciousness of humanity. Oh. So this is why it's so important to explore and find out what's going on here, right?
Okay.
And so I'm going to give you a really brief history of this guy because he's not that interesting. What's interesting is the facts around the trial and stuff. So we're going to kind of push forward real fast, right? So the guy was born in 1906, and he had an unremarkable life, unremarkable parents. He went to work for the bureaucracy in Germany. Then the Nazis come to power in 1933. He works for the Nazi bureaucracy. He's incredibly good at logistics. Efficiency, very high. And he does what he's told, right? Which is going to be his defense at the trial later.
Oh,
okay. And so in 1939, the year the war started, until 1945, he's going to work for the SD. Okay. So the SS is headed by Himmler. The SD is part of the SS and it's their intelligence branch. It's headed by Reinhard Heydrich, who we covered in another episode, the Reinhard operation in the Holocaust, because he was in charge of the Einsatzgruppen and the 3 camps, Chelmo, Belzec, and Sobibor, that were part of the Reinhard operation, right? So he works underneath him in a section of the government called 4B4. So it's the Roman numeral 4, letter B, number 4, right?
Oh, okay.
And it's titled Jewish Affairs. In that office, they try to paint it like he was the head of that office, but he wasn't. And his sole job was to manage trains. They give him requests, he manages the trains. And if you really think about it, like you think about our episode we did on Treblinka, they say it's a death camp, but it was actually a transit camp. Remember when we talked about those different Jewish witnesses, who the men and the women were separated? Right. And they were all like, what are your skills? I'm a carpenter. And they're like, okay, you're going to this camp. And they're only there for 5 or 6 days. And the same thing with the women.
And Treblinka.
Treblinka, yeah. I'm a seamstress. Okay, you're going to this other camp. Well, these trains just have to roll up and grab 42 people, go to this next camp, grab 52 people, take them to the carpentry area where they need them,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of logistics involved, and that's what this guy did. Okay. So basically, at the end of the war, he forged some papers for people who worked underneath of him in the office 4B4, and that said they were industrial workers. Now, keep in mind that everybody who's an SS member has the lightning bolts tattooed underneath their arm.
Oh,
right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's like right down here, And so what they would do was when they captured German soldiers, they would make them all strip their tops off, all put their hands straight up, and just walk single file in line. And just SS, pull them out, right? So you can't really hide that you're SS too well. So he used a fake name. He gets captured, obviously, and they put him in Eisenhower's death camps, which we'll talk about in a later episode. And so he's in there in this POW camp, but it's not a POW camp because they've changed the definition. We're going to cover all this later. It's just all war crimes, and they mass murdered German soldiers. Anyways, but basically he's in this camp, but other people know that he's an important dude, right? He's an SD, he's important. And so what they do is they steal some civilian clothes, sneak them to him, and then they make him some fake papers in this camp, where people are dying from because they have no resources. They really get resourceful to help this guy, and they sneak him out of the camp. The other Germans do, right? So he leaves the camp, and he basically works in Germany for several years under a different name now than he was using before. And then he contacts the underground, which they say is people in the Catholic Church are helping Nazis escape, right? And I don't know the motivation for that, and I don't think it's the whole Catholic Church, but so he goes to Argentina, okay, where he's going to hide. Not really, he's just going to hang out in Buenos Aires, So he gets there. Now he's using another different Ricardo Clement. He's using an entirely different name. And then now he summons his wife and 3 children. And interesting part of this is that the future looks bright for him at this point because they have a 4th child in Buenos Aires. So he's actually being positive, And so he's there with these other Germans who are just all hanging out in Buenos Aires. He worked at the Mercedes-Benz factory.
Oh, interesting.
So he's not being discreet at all. Starts at the very bottom, but immediately starts going up because he's so good at logistics, right?
Okay.
And so basically, so something else happens in here during this time before he gets captured. And this is so incredibly suspicious that you just won't believe the twists and turns in this story, okay? But in the mid-1950s, another guy named Wilhelm Sassin, right, who's a Dutch man, he's half Dutch, half German, and he was in the SS as well. He was a journalist in propaganda, but remember, propaganda back then meant political activity.
Right.
So he did that for the SS. He's hiding out down there, and they talk, and they become friends, and then the story goes, you just can't believe how wild this is. The story goes that Adolf Eichmann allows Wilhelm Sassin to record him in audio recordings for 70 hours, right?
Okay.
Now, if you want to go listen to those recordings right now, that's not a thing.
Oh.
It's not a thing. So it's going to get wild here, right? And basically, so these recordings are made. I don't know if they were ever made, honestly. And he promises not to, Adolf Eichmann says, well, these incriminate me, right? And the other guy says he won't ever publish them during his life. And
what was the motivation for recording to begin with?
Eichmann says, I'm making these recordings for science. Okay, whatever. Anyways, so that supposedly happens, right?
Okay.
And then Sassin leaves, and then the recordings are not going to be important until later, right? Where they're brought up and it's just so mysterious, And so that happens, and then basically his eldest son Klaus meets a nice German girl in Buenos Aires.
Okay.
German Jewish emigre.
Okay.
So this goes terribly. Her father gets suspicious, calls the Mossad. The Mossad sends out an investigator, identifies him as Adolf Eichmann, who they've been looking for, right? Then they send out the commando group, right, to illegally. Okay, let me tell you why they were in Argentina. I forgot this part of the story, right? Okay. But there was a soldier who used to work under Benito Mussolini in Italy. He used to fight underneath of him. He ended up becoming the premier in Argentina. Wow. So he was pro-fascist, which is why they went there.
Oh.
Okay, and a lot of them did, and into different areas too, not just Buenos Aires, which is not the best. So basically, the commando squad comes out. The goal is twofold. Verify that it is him again. Don't take the word of the Mossad investigator. And then to abduct him. So they get a safe house. They follow him home from work. They get him out of his house. They take him to the safe house. Now they need him to sign this paper saying that he will allow himself to be transported back to Israel and tried for death penalty stuff. Right? So he doesn't sign it for 2 days. He's naked and being interrogated for 2 days, we'll just say. And then he signs the paper.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So then they drug him up, put him in a flight uniform like he's a, stewardess or something, sneak him in through the, and get him out the airport. They get him to Israel, put him in a fortified base, and announce that they have him. Argentina's furious and says, we want him back. This is highly illegal. Of course, this is all highly illegal.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It's terrible, yeah. And so there are ways to extradite people. You might be surprised to hear this. There's legal ways to extradite people.
Yeah,
okay. So anyways, I'm just going to give you a fun fact. When I was researching this, I just came across this, so I added this on here.
Okay.
In Wikipedia, between 1933 and 1939, 250,000 of the 437,000 Jews in Germany had emigrated. That's just a fun fact.
Emigrated out of Germany?
250 out of 4. So there was 187,000 Jews remaining in Germany in 1939. Just a fun fact when you're looking at Holocaust stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, like the math is rough then.
Yeah. So, okay. Basically, we're going to talk about one of the things that Eichmann was involved in was he was the one who came up with the Madagascar idea.
Oh.
Right?
Okay.
So in a previous episode, I had told you that, incorrectly, that the Madagascar project was devised at the Wannsee Conference, right?
Okay, right.
Which is the famous Final Solution Conference. It wasn't. It had been devised a year before that by Eichmann, because he's the logistics guy, right?
Oh.
And Hitler had accepted that deal, right? And said, we're going to deport 1 million Jews per year from occupied territories to Madagascar. The problem is like, hold off on that a second, because we don't control the Atlantic. Britain does. And then they thought the war was going to end. They thought there was going to be peace. They thought this and that. So then when they go in 1942, so that was August 15th, 1940, that Eichmann released a memorandum titled, I'm not even going to try to read that. It's the Reich Security Main Office Madagascar Project. I'm not going to try to read it in German. So anyways, and we're going to talk about the Wannsee Conference later, right? Okay. Because this is going to come up during his trial. But I just wanted to, and he was not important at the Wannsee Conference because Reinhard Heydrich had called the conference, and he was the head of the SD. Okay. So this little guy who does trains is not super important, you know? So after he's kidnapped, but before the trial, right? This guy, Wilhelm Sassin, so Eichmann's captured on May 11th, 1960. May 11th, right? Right after that, Sassin supposedly sells the publication rights to the Sassin tapes or Eichmann tapes, right? Taken in 1956 to Life magazine. Okay? So,
like all 70 hours.
We don't know.
Oh.
Because Life magazine doesn't release the recordings. Huh. They release 2 articles. They'll tell you what's in the recordings. To this day, you're not allowed to listen to the recordings.
Odd.
Right? So you get these. Okay. Listen, down below, there's 2 documentaries. In the first documentary, right, they play excerpts from the trial in Jerusalem, right? And in it, they say that they narrate and say that they played the Sassin tapes, right? Okay. I'm just calling them Eichmann tapes because it sounds like I'm saying like assassin. Okay, the Eichmann tapes. And so they literally have a scene where the judges are sitting there listening, and they clip in an excerpt from the Eichmann tapes, and then in the next scene, Eichmann responds to it. That didn't happen. They forged it for this documentary because the Eichmann tapes weren't ever played. They didn't have them.
Oh, interesting.
Because if you go down to the 5th reference below, it's a trailer for a 3-episode miniseries called The Devil's Confession, the Eichmann tapes, that came out in 2022. Got 5 awards in Israel. Nominated for 2 awards, 1 in Israel, 1 in Vienna. Okay. Came out in 2022, not available on Amazon Prime. Not available anywhere. Then I tell them, hey, find this. I need to get it, right? So you look on Yandex, find me that link. So the next day I go to use that link, and I click play on the video, and it takes me to Chatterbait. And it says 18 stepmoms. And I'm like, no, back.
I hit play on it. It was working.
Okay, well, I did it on my phone because I was traveling. Oh, okay. And I couldn't even get it to play. So you can go find these 3 episodes somewhere. I don't know. Okay. But they're not playing the tapes. They're telling the story about the tapes from the description I read on Amazon Prime or IMDb, you know. So anyways, I'm going to tell you some of the quotes from the Eichmann tapes right now. And I'm getting these quotes from the Jewish Virtual Library, which is telling you about the Life magazine article, but you can't listen to these quotes yourself.
Amazing.
So take them as they are, right? But I'm going to tell you what they're claiming, right? So there's a series of quotes. So he's talking to Wilhelm Sassin during this, you know? Well, how do we put 10.3 million Jews to death? Then I would be content and would say, good, we have destroyed the enemy. He admits is a difficult thing to say, and I know I will be judged for it, but it is the truth. Another quote, I didn't care about the Jews deported to Auschwitz, whether they lived or died. It was the Führer's order. Jews who were fit to work would work, and those who weren't would be sent as the final solution, he says in one recording. When Sassin asks him if the Jews were to be eliminated or exterminated, Eichmann replies, if that's what I said, then yes. Eichmann said an SS brigade commander told him they put sprinklers in the showers that looked just like a shower head, and then they would bring in the idiots and throw inside hydrogen cyanide. Okay? Mm-hmm. At one point in the recording, Eichmann swatted a fly and described it as having a, quote, Jewish nature.
Awesome.
I knew you'd like that one.
Wow.
Himmler also told Eichmann that he had made a mistake in the way he set up the concentration camps. Remember, Himmler's in charge of the entire SS. Quote, I didn't know exactly what he meant by that, but he said it in such a pleasant, soft way that I understood him to mean the concentration camp should have been more elegant, more artful, more polite. They had swimming pools. They had theaters for the, you know what I mean? They had soccer leagues. Okay. Volleyball. Okay. During the war's final days, Eichmann said he called his men to his Berlin offices and said, quote, if it has to be, this is a famous one, I will gladly jump into my grave in the knowledge that 5 million enemies of the Reich have already died like animals. Enemies of the Reich, I said, not Jews. That's, the guy asking him back. I spoke these words harshly and with emphasis. In fact, it gave me an extraordinary sense of elation to think that I was exiting from the stage in this way. The Life article, and this is from the Jewish Virtual Library, the Life article ended without a mea culpa. I must say that I regret nothing. I will not humble myself or repent in any way. I could do it cheaply in today's climate. It would be too easy to pretend that I had turned suddenly from a Saul to a Paul. No, I can say truthfully that if we had killed all the 10 million Jews that Himmler's statistician originally listed in 1933, I would say, good, we have destroyed the enemy. But here, I do not mean wiping them out entirely. That would be proper. That would not be proper, and we carried on a proper way. Paradoxically, he added that he believed fate must have wanted the Jews to survive and that, quote, through thousands of years of learning and development had become superior to us. It is very depressing for me to think of that people writing laws over 6,000 years of written history, but it tells me that they must be a people of the first great magnitude, for lawgivers have always been great. Okay? So whatever, right?
Okay.
Now we're going to talk, still from the Jewish Virtual Library, about what happened with these tapes, okay?
Okay.
The tapes were considered lost until an anonymous person contributed 15 hours. They're lost after they're given to Life magazine.
Right.
They're lost. Nobody's listened to them except for the people who wrote the article, and you don't know. The tapes were considered lost until an anonymous person contributed 15 hours of the recordings to a German archive in the 1990s with the caveat that they were kept secret. According to Yariv Moser, director of the documentary The Devil's Confessions, The Lost Eichmann Tapes. That's the one I referred to that you're also not allowed to listen to, right? For many years, nobody knew where the recordings were located. It seems Sassin gave them in the 1990s to the Eichmann family, I presume because he felt the need to make amends for his actions, for his supposed betrayal by giving the interviews to Life, because he's a total turd, obviously. The Eichmann family sold the recordings in the 1990s to a publisher in Switzerland. When the publisher went bankrupt, the materials were taken to the vault of another publisher in Switzerland, and from there they were transferred to the German National Archives in Koblenz because they didn't want to have any connection to them. The German archives wanted to make sure the recordings were original. When Sassin confirmed this before his death in 2001, they released a few minutes of the material to the media. For years, only researchers vetted by the archive were given access to the tapes, in part out of fear of a neo-Nazi might gain access and misuse them.
Misuse them or just play them?
Just play them, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then, I mean, you there's a little more here. I'm not going to read it, but it's like a couple minutes were released here and a couple minutes were released there. And when you hear the tape, it sounds like there's a heavy machine running next to you, and you can hear these garbled voices, and you can kind of make out words. And I'm sorry, it's ridiculous, right?
Well, what's ridiculous?
I just don't believe any of this about the tapes.
Okay.
Okay. So at the trial, right? They use the Life magazine article. They quote from the Life magazine article. Here's our evidence of what you said to Wilhelm Sassin, right?
Okay.
And on the fifth reference below, it's the trailer to The Devil's Confession, right? It's 1 minute 47 seconds. You could watch it real quick. There's a scene that they shouldn't have put in there, but it's Adolf Eichmann standing up in his bulletproof glass window, right? And he says, if you have the tapes, and I did say that, produce them and I will be guilty.
Oh, wow. That means I didn't say those.
I didn't say those things, and you don't have the tapes. This also means for sure that the Mossad did not fabricate those tapes. If they had fabricated them, they would have used them in the trial.
Totally.
Because they were saying they were existent, but we don't have them. So therefore, the Mossad did not. Right?
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
We're going to jump around and just hit a lot of different things here, right? So during the Wannsee Conference, which was 20 January 1942, the claim, this is interesting, the claim made against the Nazis for being evil is that they conspired to, this is what they wanted to do. After the USSR was defeated, they were going to move Jews to Siberia to work camps.
Who was?
the Nazis. This was their evil plan formulated at the Wannsee Conference.
Oh,
the final solution.
Oh.
This is what the Allies did to Germans.
Right.
This is the thing that happened in real life.
Right.
This is their... Oh, my gosh. Okay, whatever.
It's almost like they accuse other people of what they do. Almost.
Yeah, amazing, right? Okay. So during the trial, they bring up 111 witnesses who are all the Holocaust survivors. They want one from every country, and they tell these stories. There's this funny part, if you want to look at it yourself, in the second documentary below, at 49 minutes, 30 seconds, right? There's this guy on there, and he's talking about, like, the planets above us, and the ashes, and then there's these other planets, and the ashes always, and the planets. And then the judge says, excuse me, you know? And the guy just flops. He goes, ah! And he's on the ground, and he's pretending to be unconscious. And the guards pick him up and put him on the thing. It's hilarious. You know what I mean?
But I have no idea. I might understand the words you just said, but he's like, he's a crazy person?
Insane. So one of the stories in the documentary is that they're interviewing this guy, and he said there's this huge gap between Holocaust survivors and the people who are moving to Israel and the people who are already in Israel. So we're going to talk about people already in Israel are Mizrahi, maybe descendants of Abraham, right? The people coming in are Ashkenazi, so they're Europeans, right? And this guy asked him, well, what happened in the Holocaust? And so he starts telling the guy the Holocaust story, right? And the guy's sitting with his wife, and the wife leans over and whispers in his ear, but this guy hears and says, man, these Europeans, they come over here and they're so fanciful. There's no connection between reality.
Wow.
You think? You know what I mean? And at one point, the guy narrating one of the documentaries, he's like, yeah, the facts of what happened in the Holocaust are just so bizarre and unbelievable. Are they?
Yeah. Talk more about that.
Interesting. Yeah. So he was officially tried for crimes against the Jewish people, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. Just very vague, right? And when they had him in the bunker, when they took him to Israel and they had him in this fortified place, they questioned him and questioned him and questioned him. And he gave depositions. Doesn't make any sense that he's talking to these people at all.
Okay.
So for some reason, he's talking to them.
Okay. But if they question him and question him and question him, they're not getting what they want.
No, they're just going and taking depositions and building a case against him. And he's just talking.
Okay.
And there's a building just, you know what I mean? They go, so anyways, I don't know if there was torture and stuff involved. I don't know if the dude wasn't lying outright, you know? Because here's a quote that he said at the trial with his own mouth, right? The Fuhrer had ordered the physical destruction of the Jews. End quote. Okay. There's no evidence for that documentary. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So this crazy thing happened. Let me see if I put a timestamp here. I did. Okay. Second documentary below, 58 minutes and 40 seconds. There's this crazy scene where they basically ask him, hey, did they talk about gas chambers at the Wannsee conference? Which they did not, because we have the record of it. We have the transcript of it, right? And he says, no, they didn't, you know. And then the judge is like, okay, but I'm going to quote from some people at the Nuremberg trials that said they did, you know. And then Eichmann, who just looks like a complete spineless loser, says, oh, okay, well, there were two parts of the Wannsee conference. There was the first part where you sit and listen in silence, and the second part where everybody talked at first. So he's intimating that only the first part was recorded in the transcript, right? So there's no record of the things that Eichmann ends up talking about, which is, he says that they talked about extermination, and then they said, well, but gas chamber, and he's like, no. So then they brought up the Nuremberg stuff, and then basically the judge bullies him. He's like, I guess they did talk about the gas chamber. Like, just, this is not real stuff, you know, that's happening.
And why would the judge be involved with that anyway?
Yeah, in their situation, so there's a 3-judge panel, it looks like. There's a prosecutor and a defense attorney. But periodically, the judge gets to ask questions. And I'm not sure if it's just the middle judge or all the judges. Okay. One time, he jumped up and said, I got to make a statement because there's a long answer. But he was only talking to the judge on the left. The other ones were ignoring him. But he was, I don't know. So. And
this is like in an Israeli court, or is it a military?
This is in Jerusalem. It's Israeli court, yeah.
Okay.
And so this is the first global court case that everybody watches. They literally make tapes at the end of the day and send them off to 56 different countries.
Wow.
So they can air them. And interesting part of the story, too, is that Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, he was against television. So they didn't have television in Israel.
Wow.
Right? You could have a television and watch foreign stuff, but they didn't have television. So he was against this, but then he thought it was important enough. So he said, I'll let you put 4 cameras in a courtroom if they're completely hidden so that nobody can see them, because I don't want them to disrupt the proceeding, you know? And so I want to talk a little bit about, because the documentary goes into it, going back to those Nuremberg testimonies, right? And one of the ones they show, it's this just absolute absurd stuff, okay? There's this guy, and his name was Rudolf Hoess, right? Hoess, H-O-SS, not Rudolf Hess, the Vice Führer. And he was, so this guy, right, was the camp commandant of Auschwitz from 1940 to 1943. Okay. Then again from a period from 1940 to 45. And they play this scenario at the Nuremberg trials, and they ask him, they say, is it true that hundreds of thousands of people were put to death at Auschwitz? And he says, jawohl, right? And then the next question is it true that Eichmann told you that over 2 million Jews were exterminated at Auschwitz? Which you're the camp commander. I don't know what Eichmann says. And then he says, that is right. Okay. So the problem is that the facts, like if you look at Auschwitz, so the facts don't...
the physical evidence.
Yeah. And so you had brought up the torture thing when I mentioned this to you, because this was so absurd I had to talk to you about it. You want to tell them?
Yeah, I mean, there was, I believe it was a Red Cross report that they, around the Nuremberg-ish time, that they had examined, if I remember correctly, it was 150 people who were going to be on trial or whatever, and 149 of them had their testicles beaten down, that they were just like shriveled little.
I think it was 148,
Okay.
So there were signs of torture.
Yeah.
And so literally, don't read Wikipedia and drive, but I was doing that on the way over here. But I've got this new theory about this, right?
Okay.
So there's the story that I've told before about how the Jewish people who went in to get justice after the war, they went to a commander and said, hey, your soldiers did this. We're going to hang you all. And he said, we didn't do any of that. And the guy said, oh, well, we're going to hang you all. Unless you want to admit that you did do it, in which case all of your soldiers get off scot-free and we'll hang you. He said, we absolutely did that. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And they said, cool, hang them all. Right? Okay. So the story of this Rudolf Hess guy, right? He gets tried at Auschwitz. Nuremberg, I'm sorry. He gets tried at Nuremberg, and then he gets sent to Poland to get tried again, right? And then immediately after that trial, he's executed.
Okay.
During that time, he writes a memoirs where he admits to just crazy stuff. Like there was, in the memoirs, he says like, okay, there were days that, he had to murder 1,000 children, and then sometimes, they wouldn't go into the gas chamber, so he had to push them in. Mm-hmm. The camp commandant is pushing them in. You think that's a true story? Do you think he's telling you the truth in there?
Right.
Right? And I'm looking at like, why? Why is he doing this? I just don't believe you. Why are you doing this? And then I realized in the Wikipedia article that he's being called at the 4th Nuremberg trial as a defense witness.
Okay.
He's being called by other Nazis who are being tried.
Okay.
And he's saying, I did all the things. I even pushed the kids in myself. That guy didn't do anything. That guy definitely didn't. You know what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
He knows they're going to all get executed for something that they didn't do. And he's trying to save as many people. He's the commander.
Yeah.
What does the commander do? Right?
Yeah.
Now, for posterity, it's not that great because you're looking at this dude and you're like, why are you saying these things that don't add up to the physical? Like, even if you just go back to like the one fact about the Holocaust is that we have the manifest for all the Zyklon B. Right? And every camp got a certain amount depending on how many inmates there were. The camps that were killing people had to get extraordinary more per capita but they didn't. Right. We got the manifest. So what you're saying is can't be true. Anyways, I would like to do an episode on the Nuremberg trials in the future, but the problem is it's such a huge voluminous with books and books of just transcripts, and I don't know how I could ever do it justice. Anyways, one of the charges at the trial was that in 1944, he already had orders to go remove all of the Jews from Budapest, Hungary, right?
Who we're talking about?
Eichmann was already under orders to do this, get the trains for him, right?
Okay.
They claimed 447,000 Jews were there. So the claim that the Israelis made against him was that they have an order from Himmler saying from Himmler's office, saying that the war is going so poorly, that's a poor use of our resources. Don't do that. He went physically to Budapest and got the trains to go against the order because he was so enthusiastic about moving the Jews to camps.
Okay.
So that was one of the claims made against him, right? One of the things that they said in the trial, they asked him this. In your opinion, is someone involved in exterminating Jews a criminal, right? So they go into this very interesting back and forth where they're saying, was Rudolf Hoess, the commandant of Auschwitz, a war criminal, right? And he's like, I can't speak, Eichmann says, I can't speak to another man's, and they're like, but in your head, and they're trying to get him to answer. And at one point, the prosecutor says, you will answer this question, And he says, in your opinion, is someone involved in exterminating Jews a criminal? And Adolf Eichmann, he sits there for a while. He stands up to make every answer, and then he stands slowly up, and he says, I cannot venture to answer, for I've never been in such a situation. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
So eventually, they find him guilty at the end of the 8 months. And when they do announce the guilty verdict, he's standing up looking at the judges. There's a look of shock on his face, right? Which could lead to the theory that he's doing all of this because he's been offered a deal.
Right.
Right? And his wife was always loyal. She flew out right before they executed him, to say bye. Like, this is the wife of a Nazi.
Right.
War criminal now about to be executed, and the Israelis let her come, Maybe because they had betrayed the deal they made with him. I don't know.
They don't care about that.
Yeah, I don't know. Now, this is interesting. So they went to hang him at 12:01 a.m. on the day they were allowed to because as quick as possible, right?
Okay.
Before he was hung, he said, in German, I'm going to say it in English, He said this, long live Germany, long live Austria, long live Argentina, the three countries I will not forget, right? And then the guy in the documentary who's telling the story, he's like, and then after they hung him, they cremated him, and I saw how small the ashes were. And I was amazed how small the ashes were. Because he's like, in Birkenau, I saw an entire mountain of, a full-size mountain of ashes, and I thought, how many souls?
Sure. Oh, ridiculous.
Not even close to reality. It just reminds me of the story I just told about the Mizrahi, and to be like, these people and their fanciful notions about reality. A mountain of ashes.
Right.
There's not even a claim that there was mountain of ashes. And and then you say it, and then they're like, this is a good piece, let's publish this. No, cut that out of your documentary.
That's insane.
Anybody with the tiniest bit of common sense can say, okay. And then basically they took his ashes in the morning before the sun rose, and they took it out to international waters, 6 miles into international waters, dumped it in the Mediterranean, I believe, so that no neo-Nazis would rise up because of Adolf Eichmann. Anyways, that's the story. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I think the thing you said halfway through is the biggest thing. There's all this physical stuff. We've looked at pictures of the different camps and the stains on the walls, just all of it. And people can say whatever they want. If the physical evidence doesn't match with that, you're lying. You were coerced, whatever. I don't know. But so many of the things are just, it's craziness. Like he was taught to say what the final solution was. I mean, he's repeating their rhetoric. Because the final solution was not what he, you know what I mean? Like that's, he didn't come up with that. They told him to say that. So it's very interesting.
I can't believe that this absurd event is the one that got the Holocaust into the national consciousness of mankind.
And everyone's like, oh, yeah.
The guy passing out, you should just see him flop. It's just hilarious,
And this was during his trial? Oh, yeah.
During Eichmann's trial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if the Germans who were tried, Nuremberg and all that, and even the commanders who were trying to take credit for things to save, if they knew the future of what this was going to be used for, would they have all just stood their ground?
Right.
We have to die for this because this is bigger than us.
Our men have to die for it because we won't take this action.
Because this has terrible consequences. Like if they knew, would they have?
Yeah. Let me tell you another funny thing that happened, and this is just conjecture, okay? So during the trial, right after the scene where that guy flopped, so I gave you the timestamp for that. That was 48 minutes and 30 seconds in the second documentary, I believe. And right after that, they said there were also other disruptions in the courtroom, right? Yeah. And they have this Hasidic Jew in the back who jumps up and says, remove him, right? And he's pointing. As soon as I seen it, I'm like, He's pointing at the witness.
Right.
I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
Because why would you be looking at Eichmann, who's inside of a booth in his bulletproof glass with 2 guards standing there with him? Why would you be yelling, remove him at Eichmann?
It's the guy who's
you could
saying
be like,
something.
Hang him. Okay, you're talking about Eichmann.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're talking about the Jew, the Ashkenazi white person up there who's making up a fanciful story.
Right.
And these people are like, the Hasidic Jews or the Orthodox Jews are like, we know what you're doing. You're trying to fulfill this prophecy. You know what I mean? We know what you're doing. I just think
it's
that
sacrilege.
So that's my conjecture on that scene.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's true.
With editing, yeah, it's tough to know the truth. But yeah, that makes sense.
I think the tapes are complete garbage.
Yeah.
I think if something has credibility, there's a way to do it to make it to convince us of its credibility.
Like play them.
What?
Just saying.
You've done everything in your power to make us have no credibility in your tapes.
Right. Yeah.
It's an insane series of events.
Totally.
So yeah, I don't find Adolf Eichmann credible either.
Right. I totally agree with you.
There was this interesting part of so he was a bureaucrat. I told you about that, right? He follows orders. His defense is he follows orders. But there was an interview with one of the commandos, who's now an older man in the interview, from the Mossad, who captured him, right? And he said, this is the strangest man, you know? He said, I expected to find this devil, and I just found this old man. And I was just so taken aback that he follows orders. He's like, as soon as we kidnapped him, or as soon as we captured him, he said, of course he didn't say kidnap. As soon as we captured him, he immediately just started doing everything we said. I said, turn left, he turned left. I say, turn right. I say, eat. I say, sleep. I say, poop, you know?
Yeah.
And he just starts doing everything they said. Like, he just does whatever people tell him. Like, he's got no backbone or will.
Yeah.
You know, he's really good at logistics, but he does whatever. So when he's saying all these things, I don't know.
Okay. It's very easy to go from what you were just saying to, hey, this is your testimony.
Right.
Okay.
Like, it's not even that hard.
Right.
And then you say, hey, we're going to cut you a deal.
Well, you said he went from pre-Nazi Germany as an administrator and just went right in.
Right.
So he wasn't like attached politically to anything, or he just went with the flow.
Yeah, and they found no history of anti-Semitism from pre-Nazi times. But then there's the situation with Hungary where he went out there to do the job. Now, it could have been not a thing having to do with Jews, but just I have to complete the task. I have to complete the task. I was ordered to complete the task.
If it happened.
Yeah, did you belay the order because you don't think I can complete the task? Watch this. You know what I mean? Could be that, like a lemming type thing.
But do we know that trip to Budapest actually happened?
Yeah, I think there's video of it.
Okay.
They show it in the documentary of him arriving. Okay, another thing, a takeaway I want to put on this that I think is interesting is that this guy witnessed mass shootings from the Einsatzgruppen.
Okay.
Eichmann did, right? And there's even videos of like right before some horrific event's going to happen. And you could just see Eichmann like walking through the thing, but they didn't know who he was originally, you know? And then they've compiled this later. And it strikes me that we've talked about this before in Operation Reinhardt. They have the Defiance movie with Daniel Craig, and they're running around freedom fighting it out, you know? But they're terrorists to the Germans. And then we did the Operation Reinhardt video, and we assessed the numbers of people that died during Operation Reinhardt, which was 2 million. Then we assessed the people in the camps. Then we assessed how many were killed in the Holocaust of bullets, and we came out the number like 20,000, right?
Yeah.
I feel like after studying this, I feel like that number's higher. I feel like people who are lying about the Holocaust have inflated the numbers in the camps so much that when we take the total number and subtract it from the camps number, we have a too low of a Holocaust of bullets number.
Oh, okay.
I feel like there were more partisans shot than reflected in the numbers or reflected in our episode. This is just my feeling. I can't prove this to you. And it totally hurts my case. So I'm just giving you, this is what I feel like.
Sure.
I feel like, because he participated in multiple mass shootings where he was there, you know?
Interesting.
Of partisans and people who were helping partisans and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know how true that is because they said they were ordered to put him into the USSR anti-tank ditches. Put him in there and then cover him up, you know?
Gotcha.
But then you never hear the story of them uncovering a tank ditch with a bunch of bodies in it. You don't hear that story ever, you know? So I don't know.
Gotcha.
Anyways, was the guy a villain or a hero?
I feel like it's got to be villain.
He was just nothing, though, to me.
Yeah, well,
He's just nothing.
But if I have to pick one, did he hurt the world or help the world? He hurt the world based on his lack of backbone and going with the flow or whatever it was. he was a net negative for Earth.
It could have been just as simple as they just said, hey, we got you out of Argentina. We know where the wife and 4 kids are at. Mm-hmm. We'll just go down there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We'll do this to them. And then they show them pictures of stuff that the Mossad's done to other families that they've assassinated.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as that.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, I'll go with you.
I feel like he wasn't a villain for his actions taken in Nazi Germany unless you believe the Holocaust.
Right.
If you believe, like, there definitely Jews died at camps and by the Einsatzgruppen. Mm-hmm. If you believe the entire bucket of the Holocaust, then he was a terrible villain.
Okay.
But he was a villain from our perspective because he just had no backbone. He just couldn't stand for anything.
Right. Yeah, but not out of malice or whatever. Like, his intent was just...
I thought about myself too in this situation. Like, if I was Adolf Eichmann and I'm in jail, mm-hmm. and then they go tell my wife and they're like, hey, if he totally caves, you're going to live. She's going to be like,
oh no.
Me and the kids, we don't stand a chance in this one, you know what I mean? Because I'm so stubborn, you know what I mean?
You are.
But anyways, that's what I got. I think it's
okay. Very interesting story. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully you guys learned something. This was pretty much all new. I mean, we talked about it earlier in the week, but other than that, this is all... Yeah, very interesting. Amazing how much the stuff gets twisted and all that. You have any other good stories like that you know about that would be interesting to cover? Maybe like this isn't really a mainstream one. I mean, it had impact in the 60s and all that.
Right.
But it's not something you hear about all the time. Yeah, let us know below. And we love looking into all these, and I love learning about it. So, yeah, let us know. We'll see you next time.